Well, I hope I can make this video as clear as possible. This was actually a subject that took some serious research by me, and I'm going to be doing this on my 1989 Sportster to make it more versatile. I want to keep it like a Sportster, but I just kind of want to make it like, a Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades type bike. The Sportster is a lightweight bike for a Harley, but for a regular motorcyclist, Sportster is not a lightweight bike, so it could do a lot of functions. What I got a problem with the Sportster is that it's not geared into 4-speed. If you gear it for a highway, your first gear is too tall, especially in the 87 or late 86 to 90 models. From the late 1986 to 1990 models, first gear is too tall if you go ahead and gear it with a 23 sprocket and a 46 sprocket in the back. That's how I got mine set up. Now, that makes a big difference on a highway, though. So, for instance, in fourth gear, the stock setup with the 21 sprocket in the front on the transmission side, off the transmission mount on a chain drive, with a 21 sprocket and a 48 in the back, it's like a 3.97 or 4-to-1 ratio. When you go into 2346, it's like 3.5 to 1 or 3.47. That's what I got. But my first gear is very tall. Now, on my particular engine, it's not so bad at all because the engine is not just a 1200. It's got the Andrews cam in it. It's got the Baisley high flow oversized valve, some headwork. Plus, it's balanced with S&S rods. It's balanced with the 60% factor. Even though that's a high RPM balance, with the 60%, it gives you more low-end torque. So it's a torque monster, and being in a lightweight bike, 1200 cc's is still 20 over 1200, and all that other stuff it's still fine. But what I want to do is when I change out a part in this thing, I want to go to something that changes and gets rid of that close ratio gearing. Now, I want to define how this works because it's a little bit confusing to the uninitiated, and hopefully I could explain it better. The close ratio gearing is as such. First gear is 229. Now, that's not the final drive ratio. Like the final drive ratio is like what I showed down here, 912, right? When you're going through everything. So it'd be like, I think it's 229 times, what is it? 4.97 or something like that. Yeah. That's what I think it is. But, yeah, it'd be 229 times 3.97 would be the final drive ratio. But let me say, like this, so that's where that 9, in other words, when I'm looking at this number here, when you're looking at this number over here, 912, that's at 229 times 3.97. That should be the 912. So you got the 3.97 times 166, gives you the other number, which is the 659. So this is the close ratio. So what they do is like on the clutch drive that comes out of the that's pressed into the trap door in the transmission, a trap door in the transmission. The clutch drive gear is attached to the countershaft gear, and those gears are different on the late 1984 to early 1986. So they still had the Ironhead Evo all the way up to 85. So the Ironhead changed to an alternator in 1984, sometime in 1984, and it was also an alternator in 1985. They changed the transmission clutch drive gear, and countershaft gear. A lot of the other parts are the same. Now, and they also changed the countershaft gear, the countershaft itself. But most of the gears are the same, going all the way from the 1950s to the 1990 in a 4-speed. A lot of this stuff is the same as far as the gears go. So when you change, what you have in 1986, the clutch gear, which is the thing that's pressed into the trap door, you press it in there. Now on a stock trap door, there's a retaining ring if you're using a zippers door with the double bearing, there's no room for the retaining ring, but it's so wide in there that the interference fit will keep that clutch gear in there. You just press it in there. I'll get onto that in a minute, though. But this is the ratio, 17 to 23. So you got a ratio and an 18 teeth to 26 teeth from 89 or from late 86 up through 90. So I got to 89. That's the ratio. So it makes it about 10% difference. But that's the exact factor, 1.09954, whatever it is, right? So that's where you're getting, you're going from a 252 to a 229, right? So you're bringing up first gear to a lower numerically, but a higher, in other words, a higher gear, a taller gear. So but when you have it geared overall for, like lower, like on the actual where the chains are, where the sprocket is on for the chain, the final drive. In other words, if you're using the close ratio gears and you have a geared stock like the way it is, like on a chain with the 21 and 48 sprocket on the rear wheel and the 21 on the transmission, coming off the transmission, the 21 in the front and the 48 in the back on the rear wheel, this thing pulls off the line fine. But when you're going down the highway at 70 miles an hour, you're running about 4,000 RPMs. Now, I geared mine. I changed. Instead of having 2346 sprockets, I got 2148. I mean, I instead of 2148 sprockets, I put 2346 sprockets. That's like a 17% difference or something like that. That's about. It makes me, when I'm going down the highway, run about 3,200 RPMs at 70 miles an hour or something like that, which is fine. It's just that the first gear is kind of tall. Now, you can go to an even wider ratio, but then you'd have to put the Andrews counter shaft in, which goes from like the 84 and back, and you'd have to change out another part. And I was like, I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to use as many Andrews gears as possible and keep it basically just like a 1986 transmission out of the Evo. Same thing. So the parts you really need to change the to the wide ratio the way it was in 1986 is just this: 17-tooth early style clutch gear, which is late 1984 to early 1986. So late 1984 was an iron head. 1985 Sportster was an iron head. Early 1986 was an Evo. Then sometime in 1986 they changed it to the 18-tooth, and that was the same way up to 1990 until they came out with the 5-speed transmission. So you would need that part. And that runs, and this is the HT part, the Harley part number right here. That's, as far as I could tell, it's around $95. Not an Andrews part. You can get them about that cheap. In this, you would also need the accompanying countershaft drive gear, the one that goes on the. So that's coming right off. When you're driving into the transmission, first driving into the transmission, right from the clutch housing. It's going to be that clutch gear, and then it goes to the countershaft drive gear, which is the countershaft. And then you would need this. That's a 27-tooth, so it goes up from a 26. So you're getting about 10% better gearing there, but your final drive is still 1-to-1. So, the factor is exactly not 10%, but it's actually 9.95475%. That's what it would be. Okay? That's what's making it bring this gear. The first gear lower, second gear is lower, third gear is lower. It's still leaving them like, exact. It's just like the early 1986 Evo. Now, they had this because I think the early 1986 Evo was an 1100. Then when it came out with the 1200, they made a taller first gear. But to me, that gearing is fine, but I don't like the final drive ratio because, the Sportster with the 2148 sprockets. That's the transmission sprocket coming off on the main chain, going to the back to the 48 in the back on the rear wheel. That is making that bike run like 4,000 RPMs at 70 miles an hour. When it came out with the 5-speed, the 883 5-speed and the 1200 5-speed are both, they got a little bit, I think the transmissions are the same, but they got a little bit different ratio as far as the what's running on the belt drive itself. Like this 2148, I'm talking about the final chain, nothing inside the transmission. That's the final chain. That's stock. And when I run a 2346. Now I was running a 2348, but I really wanted to get overdrive going all the way, so I went to the max. That's the most radical highway stuff I could find for my bike without going to some custom thing. And I don't think you can fit a 24 sprocket in the front. There's not enough room under the chain guard unless you take under the sprocket cover, unless you take the sprocket cover off or modify it or something. But this is final. It works absolutely fine with the final drive ratio, the 2346. Plenty of going down the highway cruising, like running 3,200 RPMs. You could run. The bike would run fine even with 4,000 RPMs. So that's kind of high. But 3,200 RPMs running down the highway at 70 miles an hour, you can run that all day. That's not going to be a problem. It's just that the first gear is kind of tall. On my specific bike, it's not that bad because the engine was worked over. But if you got a stock 1200 and you run 2346 sprockets on a final chain drive, maybe the 2348 might be better. But if you make this modification where you're making this, you're changing those gearing, the first gear is going to be like, it's going to have more pull. It's a lower number. It's a higher number numerically, but it's a lower gear. That's that's how you actually term it. Higher number numerically, but a lower gear. So in other words, you'd make the first gear with that change, getting those two parts, you'd make it into a 252. Now, the reason I said you should probably do this, because there's one major defect with the Sportster transmission. And this is the fix for that defect. The Zippers Billet 4-speed Evo trapdoor. This thing, it's got two bearings in it, and it's thicker all the way around. So they give you 4 longer bolts, and they also give you this, it's like a spacer that goes in here. And the reason that spacer goes in here is because this is wider, and the thing that goes over this is the clutch shell or whatever. Let's see if I can get a picture of it here. I don't know if I got it right here. Yeah, I'm not showing it. This here, this piece right here, this would be pressed into that. So when that zipper's door, this door is replacing this door right here. This door is replacing that door. So this door is thicker. It's made out of better aluminum. So it's got longer bolts. And then this will go over that after this is pressed in here, because I'm not showing it. The clutch hub goes over that. And it needs that space. I don't know what this bolt's for. It probably goes in. I'm not sure exactly where. It might go into this hole right. Oh, it goes in there. I think it goes in this hole right here. This is where the shifter shaft that goes back to the forks goes right in here. Now, I've had my transmission out a couple times for little BS parts, and it's not that hard to take the transmission out. To put this door on, you'd have to first check to make sure the machining's good, the bolts are all lined up and everything, and you'd have to take out your old this piece here, the clutch. I think it's called a clutch gear. Yeah, clutch gear. You'd have to press that out and press it back into this. What I say is, before you do that, get a new one. Get a new one, and don't get the same exact part. Get the one from the 86, which has the 17 tooth one, which the one in the late '86, the early '86 one had the 17 tooth, which is the same as the last 2 years of the Ironhead. It was only around for like 3 years. Andrews doesn't make that specific part. What they want you to do, if you change it to this setup, they want you to get the ones from like early '84 and back, like in the '70s type transmission parts for the countershaft gear, and put that in there. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep it exactly, and it's not that important because I'm not racing the damn thing. I want to probably get all these gears one at a time, put them in a box till I'm all ready to do this. But the only two parts you really need, say you're changing this part, the zipper's billet out, you're changing that door out, which is $460. You would have to, you wouldn't need this part, the main shaft. You wouldn't need that part. You need these two parts to change back your ratio to a wider ratio. And I personally think they should have not did what they did from the factory because, if you got your gearing on the chain itself, geared to highway, that wide ratio, you definitely don't need 6 speeds in a Harley. That's ridiculous. That engine's got so much torque. 6 gears is ridiculous. 5 speeds, that's good. 4 speeds is plenty adequate. They've had 4-speed Harleys from the 50s all the way up to the 80s. I mean, and actually up to 90 in the Sportster. Absolutely fine. You do not need even 5 speeds. I think the Sportster that is from 91 to 95 or so is a sweet area. I would not get a 2004 and up because you can't take the transmission out except if you split the cases. And I'm like, I'd rather have the old style, even if it's not rubber mounted and it vibrates. I don't care. I mean, I'm fine with that. I put this part in here because I have to. I got to get a main shaft because I have. I tore up the end of the splines on my main shaft a little bit. It's not bad. I mean, it's not screwed up. But if I was racing the hell out of it, it might have a problem later. That was because I used to race the bike hard. I used to not race it on a drag strip, but I used to run it really hard on the street. Like all out, power shifting and everything like that. That's what I was thinking. I probably should change all these gears. So, these are the parts I want to get for the transmission. I'll probably get them one at a time. I definitely have to change out this main shaft. And actually, second and third gear those are important gears too. The one part they don't make is for these, Andrews will not make, is this part right here. They make the main shaft low gear because that's the same from the 1950s and 1990s. The main shaft and counter shaft second gear, they're the same from the 50s to 1990. The main shaft third gear and counter shaft gear, that's the same from the 50s to 1990. All those years, right? So a lot of the parts are the same. Now, as far as the main shaft itself, this is not that many years, 84 to 1990. That's the one for my bike. But prior to that, I think it goes back like more years for the main shaft. But the gears themselves, they make them. They just don't make this particular gear. What they want you to do is get the one from the late Ironheads, the Ironhead Sportsters use that counter shaft gear, and since you're using a counter shaft low gear from an Ironhead, you'd have to get the counter shaft itself. So, and then shim it up a little different. And I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I want to do that because this way I want to be able to have it exactly like the service manual has it, the same exact parts as the early 1986 Evo transmission, because the exact specific parts for the early 1986 Evo transmission, if you're taking all the parts in aggregate, even though most of them are the same, it's its own animal because of this, right? And combined with this, the clutch gear and a counter shaft gear. So I could probably get these cheaper. I might be able to go with V-twin parts or something, but I figure I'm going to get these off of with Andrews. And this won't be the total cost but I'm not too worried about my transmission because actually it has been rebuilt before. There's no gears put in it, but it had all new bearings and seals. So, it's not that bad. The reason one other thing on my particular bike where I'm not too worried about a clutch shell problem with it, because the reason they have this clutch shell with the double bearings is because, this trap door with the double bearings is because the clutch shell will rock back and forth on that shaft. And hopefully I'm explaining this, because if you know what I'm talking, if you know some of this stuff, it rocks back and forth. The clutch shell rocks back and forth on the shaft, and that clutch shell will absolutely hit the stator. The magnets in it will hit the stator. Now, on my clutch shell, I just hope this is clear as mud. On my clutch shell, I had it reworked at a machine shop. And they put it in a special basket, and they shaved the weights down more. It would hit. In other words, it would hit. See, that's coming. See, the trap door is right here. That's the trap door. That other. Let's see. Let me get back to this. That big bolt right here. That's probably that one right here. With the locking tabs on it. They give you a longer one because this is bigger. So these 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4 go up in here, and this big bolt is with the locking tab with the shifting mechanism. Now the clutch shell it fits over this. That's your clutch gear with the spines on it. And since this bearing in here is a single bearing on the stock one, this is a double row bearing. This is all thicker. So this doesn't rock back and forth as much. If this rocks back and forth under real hard load, the stator right here hits those magnets. And I know they make a clutch hub that is stainless steel. It's all inside stainless steel. They got that kind. I don't have that kind. This is before they had that aftermarket stuff. I had mine done by a machine shop, and actually it's been good for years. So I'm not really thinking it's going to implode any time, because before I changed that part a few times. It ran me hundreds of dollars. It's that part is like a $400 something part, and it pisses you off when you got to pay that kind of money for some twice, plus change out the stator, which will run you like $80 or something like that. And this is like the whole transmission right here. So actually what you're changing is, see, this is here's the clutch shell. Excuse me, the clutch gear. This is coming off the clutch basket that's sitting in here. And this is your counter shaft. So that clutch gear and that counter shaft. So I'm talking about like when those ratios. So on the 86, right? On the 86, this is a 17 tooth, and that's a 27. And then on the 87 or the late 86 up to 90, this is an 18 tooth, and this is a 26. That's what changed the gear. So I think this is first, second, third. I forget which is which on this thing. I think this is the first. The first is over here. Yeah, and then this is second, and this is third. You can see the bigger gear is first. And then the last, the fourth gear is basically just going straight through. You can't change that. You change the gearing on the fourth gear by what this is attached to. This would be attached to your transmission sprocket under your, the sprocket cover, and you see on the side of the engine, which goes down to your chain drive, right? This, like the case of the transmission, like this thing sits in here. So you see this part of the transmission right here that's where this goes, right into there. And these needle bearings, I'll tell you one thing, if you're pulling this out, when you go push this back in, you got to put grease all around these needle bearings, real heavy grease. because this is not. They're just in there loose. They're just like you got to be careful when you're putting this back in. Because you can knock one of those needle bearings out. You got to put them in with heavy grease. This is your starter drive off your starter motor right here. So like if you ever got to change your starter, you got to take the primary cover off. Take the clutch off and all this, everything else, the clutch hub off and everything. Well, I don't think you have to. You don't have to take it off. You got to take the primary cover off, and there's your two bolts right here. But you'll have to disconnect the clutch lever and stuff, and that kind of crap. Bike is actually fairly easy to work on. Sportster, even if Sportsters from, when they had the door, the trap door, the case of the trap door, which is this thing, they still got disadvantages because if you blow up your transmission, and I've heard of people doing this, like they'll be banging second gear. That's one of the weak points sometimes that's because, when people take off hard, they usually don't pop the clutch. They take off hard. What's the next gear they're going to bang? Second gear. It's usually shock. And if you blow out, sometimes you could blow out second gear and it'll go right out the side of the case. And of course, since you got like a unit construction there, it's like, you're going to be looking to get your cases welded and stuff. So that's, one of the disadvantages. I know with the 5-speed, it's a better transmission. But, when 2004 and up, they got it so you got to split the cases, even though it's a rubber-mounted engine and stuff. That's an advantage. I hands down, definitely, Harley Davidson made it that way because, if you got a transmission problem on a 2004 and up, and you got to split the cases, even if the part costs you there's a part in here that cost that I had to change in this thing a while ago. I'm probably going to put another video out on it. That is called the shifter. I don't know. It's a shifter pawl. It's not the shifter pawl. It's something like that. It's a Ford. It's a $10 part now. I got. It's like $4 when I bought it, and the guy at Kennedy's Custom Cycles in California, he knew right away what it was. I says it's real hard to shift from second to third. He goes, I know what that part is, and it was this little dinky $4 part. I don't know if I can find it on here. And pissed me off because I had to take the old transmission to get at it. And I picked up this tool here. This plate that goes over here from Jim so I could do all the measurements on it. So if I ever want to do this. I'm not going to do it just for the heck of it right now because if I don't see any problems, I'm not going to do it for now. But I'm ready to do it. But I would recommend if you're putting it in that zipper's trap door, go to the wide ratio, and then you can also gear the bike more for highway. Then you got a Sportster that's really like a jack of all trades. And there's nothing wrong with the Sportster. So the part I was talking, is this one right here, number 11, that thing, which is cam follower. The original one is kind of made out of this pot metal. If you get any of the one, you get the one from Drag Specialties or Twin Power. They're made out of steel. They won't mess up. I have not had a problem with this part though, even though I put the standard one in, because I started running this stuff. I started putting like 2 ounces of automatic transmission door lube. I know some people go nuts saying, why do you put that in? Not to fill in the whole transmission. I was putting like 2 ounces out of the pint and a half that goes in there, whatever that is. It's something like 24 ounces. So like 2 of it is like door lube. The transmission shifts easier and it finds neutral easier. And this part hasn't broken in years. I broke it within 2 years. And now all this time it's still good. But I got an extra one that's the steel one. So if you're in there doing this job, you definitely would want to get this $10 part right now there, the cam follower. It is like, I don't know why they don't make this thing out of steel in the first place, But I kept thinking to myself, a little dinky part like this broke on the 5-speed. For what the dealer costs to split the cases to fix the bike, and I don't think 5-speeds have that many problems, though. That's one of the reasons you're not going to have a problem that easily. But they're going to be telling you to trade up and get another bike. My thing I got so sick of working on my Sportster because I used to beat the heck out of it for like when I got it, like a real lot. I don't do that anymore because it's too expensive. But plus plus it's life-threatening. It's probably, it's a good thing it was expensive, because that really told me not to do that anymore, and probably that's why I'm still alive. But every year they make something. They change stuff on Harley. They make some things better, and they tell you what they make better, and they make other things screwed up. They make other things cheaper, and I can tell you a million different things. You're better off if you like the bike. You can always modify it. The thing is, there's a lot of machinists out there. Like I had my clutch shell redone some years ago. Still good. The original ones didn't last for nothing. Even the starter rings, they spun on the clutch shell. I don't know if it's on here or if you can find it. I'll try to show what that part is. Yeah, clutch shell. Hey, yeah, this thing right here. This thing. These magnets, they pop off. I had mine machined down. The magnets are machined down more to give more clearance between that and the stator, and they're put in a special nylon cage that was all glued in there somehow with epoxy. And then the starter ring, this is a Japanese part made by Showa, by the way, too. USA, they tell USA, $400 or $500, something like that, $450. And on it, when they went to the 5-speed, they put the alternator up on they got it out of the clutch area where the heat is. They put it up on the engine drive sprocket instead, which actually spins faster than this thing and gives you more alternator output and avoids all this problem. But you can totally alleviate this problem with the zippers door. And actually, even if you get the aftermarket one like this, it's all stainless steel inside of here. It's coated with stainless steel, and the magnets won't come off. It won't screw anything up. But the way I got mine from the machine shop, it's probably even better because it was shaved down. It's got more clearances. So if the clutch, excuse me, the bearing in the trap door, if that gets more worn out, like this bearing inside of here, it's got more. It can rock more, and it still won't hit the stator. But I want to change this door out eventually. Expensive part, but I'm not into just changing something out because in case it breaks. Right now I got on my bike a tiny little LED gauge up on the handlebars that tells me if I'm charging the charging system is working. It'll tell you like an LED going into the green, it's putting out like 13.5, 14 volts, so the system's charging. If I see that go down to like 12 volts, then I know it's not charging. Then I know, the clutch shell probably hit, the stator again. Then I'm going to get this part and change everything out. But since I'd have to press in a new clutch gear, and I'd have to press the clutch gear into this anyway, I would go and get the other style, the old style, right here. Which means I'd have to get the countershaft drive gear. And you could actually, if there's another thing they even offer from Andrews, where you can go to an even wider ratio. That is, but it's talking about earlier gears and stuff. You could even go to a wider ratio. Then you would have to use the early countershaft. You would have to, for sure. With this, the main shaft low gear, that's the same gear from 1954 to 1990. Andrews doesn't make the countershaft low gear for the 86 to 90 Sportster. They don't make that one. What they can do is they have the one that's earlier, from 84 back. But then when you buy that, you also have to buy the Andrews 84 and back. I don't know what it goes back to, the 70s or whatever it is. The iron head, the late iron head countershaft to work with it. And I thought, I could put most of the parts in your Andrews. I'll have a few of them that are Harley standard parts. And actually the one you really got to worry about the most is second gear and probably third gear. I think first gear you probably have to worry about if you're doing a lot of burnouts or something. But, if you're just hammering from first to second, second gets hammered the hardest. then third. And usually by the time you're ready to go into fourth, it's usually like, I'm just going to put it in fourth. Fourth is actually just run it straight off of this, right? Right straight off of this. So, but you don't have to change any of this stuff right here. You don't have to change any of that. I was thinking about if I'm in here, I'm going to probably get all these parts too, because as it is, and you don't have to change this too. The main shaft. I got to change mine. But, and this would cost you a little more than this too, because you're going to have gaskets, stuff like that. I mean, maybe you want to change your clutch cable while you're in there, right? Maybe you want to change the little nylon shoe that goes on a primary chain, right? Because that wears down first. So it might be a little more, but still you're talking about, $900, more than $900 less than this setup here. But, and like I said, you can even go to a wider ratio. I'm not showing it here. No, I'm not showing it here. But if you look up the Andrews catalog, they can tell you that you have to put in, there's an even a wider ratio where you can go to even, I think it's a 268 or something like that on the first gear, but then you'd have to put in the earlier counter shaft. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep it just like a total stock early 1986 Evo that I think it had the 1100cc engine, the same exact gear ratio in it, in the transmission. And which should be plenty wide enough gear ratio for me. And I'll be able to, because right now, on my particular engine, I'm not really having a problem with this 2346 setup here. This, I can run this down the highway at 70 miles an hour, no problem. It is a very tall first gear, but the engine has, that engine is not a stock 1200. And, but it's, it's almost like I'm starting out in gear 1.5, not like second gear, but it's almost like I'm starting out gear 1.5. I think on a standard stock, bone stock 1200, if you're running 2346, your gearing in first gear with this would be pretty bad. You probably would want to run, maybe you could run a 2348 like that, and that still would give you plenty of highway room. But like I said, I'm trying to make the bike more of a jack of all trades, because without making it not a Sportster, because you can make your Sportster into a garbage barge, and that's what I call them. I'm not too keen on the big bikes. I know people knock the Sportsters, but I don't know, the big bikes seem like they're too wide. And one time I had to push my bike 10 miles because somebody screwed with it, and I was pushing it up a hill. And I remember even sometimes when I'm backing it up in a parking lot, I'm thinking to myself, most of those big bikes don't have reverse. And I'm like, this bike weighs 500 pounds. I can't imagine somebody trying to manipulate an 850-pound bike. Now, I mean, you're going down the highway and you're driving like 6 hours or something on a highway. Yeah, the big bikes are better, but how often do you do that? And actually, right now, I know that I talked about going to the different rear tire. Like I was saying, a stock tire on the rear of the the Evo Sportster from 1990 to 86 is a 130/90 16-inch rim, 130/90. You can go to a 140/85 profile, same diameter, 0.2 of an inch wider on each side, easily fit under the fender, and it gives you 103 more pounds load capacity. It goes from 73 on a low capacity to 77 rating, which I think is it's like 103 more pounds. I know that, and it gives you a margin of safety. So if you're touring with the bike and you're near or at maximum load capacity, having that rear tire that is the next one up without actually changing the diameter of the tire, it'd be a smart thing. So that makes that Sportster into a jack of all trades. Now with the engine beefed up and having this wide ratio thing in it and having it with geared for highway, I mean, you got the best of both worlds all the way around. Now if you add progressive shocks in the front and the back and stuff like that, and you've got better fork oil in it besides shocks, and everything's rebuilt in the forks, and everything's tightened up the way it should be, the head bearings and the swing arm bearings and all that junk, and the wheel bearings are gone, the bike would be fine. It does vibrate, but I'm like, you know, when I got the bike years ago in '89, and that was being a that was like the newfangled thing. Evos were for like, they were saying they were for pussies. I mean, really, they were saying that back then. Now it's old school stuff, right? I mean, everybody was running. The guys that are running shovel heads, the big twins. You know, so the Evo came out, I don't know, in the 80s. Like I know the Sportster Evo came out in '86, but they had the Evo before that with the big twin, right? But they had the shovel heads, what is it, up to '83 or something like that? They were 1200s, right? So the Sportster comes out with a 1200. So why are you saying that's a little bike, especially if you got modifications in it? Is that a small bike? No. I mean, really, come on. And, you know, I'm like, you know, so it's got more horsepower than a shovel. You know, and I'm not talking a 93-inch S&S Sidewinder shovel. That would be the ultimate. And it's lighter. You know, and it's 4 speeds. The shovels are all 4. There's nothing wrong with 4 speeds. You know, Harley came out with 6 speeds because the Jap bikes were coming out with 6 speeds, and it was like, you know, it was like a marketing thing. They don't use this 6-speed stuff. I mean, you don't use it. It's ridiculous. 5 speeds is plenty. 4 actually works absolutely fine as long as the engine's got enough torque and it's a wide enough gear ratio. I personally don't like this close ratio stuff. They should have left it alone. I realize why they did that, because they wanted to make the bike faster by gearing it less for the highway. Because the sports, you know, they were trying to really sell you a bike that, you know, oh, okay, if the Sportster runs kind of, like, in other words, just tell you, like, okay, the Sportster is not really designed for cruising down the highway for long lengths of time. They'll tell you that, right? So they got the bike geared like where it revs like 4,000 RPMs. I'm talking like the Evo Sportsters, right? The early chain drive ones, the first ones before the 5-speed. So the bike's revving like 4,000 RPMs at 70 miles an hour, right? So they're telling you, like, you know, oh, go to the next bike up. You know, and then you think, okay, so you put, now in my case, I don't have a problem with mine because I got mine geared with these sprockets, 2346. Now, you can run it, you know, the only reason mine works with 2346 because that's not a stock 1200. It's got a lot of torque and it's got a lot of horsepower for what it is, right? I mean, it's not the best bike in the world or nothing, but it's got a lot more than stock. So it pulls like crazy, even though it's got a very tall first gear, the way it's geared. Now, I'm fixing that. I'm going to be fixing that later. But right now, it's not a problem. Now, if you wanted to go, you could go 2348, even with a stock 1200. You're not going to have a problem. And that'll run down the highway pretty good, too. But if they would have came out with these sprockets, 2346, and left the wide ratio, you wouldn't be like looking, well, I got to upgrade this bike. Because, you know, if I change the sprockets on the final drive, then it doesn't work as well in first gear, right? And you don't know about this trick I'm telling you right here, where you just got to change, really, these 2 parts. You don't even got to change this one. You know, because this is just a heavy-duty part to make sure that clutch shell doesn't mess up. I forgot, I think I paid, I don't know, it was years ago, in a machine shop up in Virginia. I think it was a little over $200. They did the work to fix my clutch shell so the weights will stay in there and it won't, and it got more clearance so it won't hit the stator. And I haven't had any problem. And I did that like 15 years ago. It's still good, all right? So, I mean, but I'm thinking, you know, this bike is getting more wear on it. Eventually, I'm going to have to rebuild stuff. This is the stuff I'm going to put in the transmission. And then I'm going to put this. But actually, you only need these 2 parts right here to change it to the wide ratio. But you got to have a press. You got to have a press to get to press out the part that goes in there. Which, you know, it's, well, we'll see what that is again. I mean, I don't know if I got it right here again, but, you know, I can't. Maybe I do. You got to have a press to press out that part from the, and that's the reason I got the 12-ton press, too, partly, because that's one thing. That's one other thing. So, what is figure 19 here? Figure 19 is 4th gear, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, which is that. Anyway, what I'm saying is, you don't need that many special tools to do this stuff. Actually, if you change those two parts only, you probably wouldn't even need a special tool to check all the clearances and stuff because you're not changing that much. When you're changing a lot of parts, you probably this piece right here. See this right here. That's your clutch gear. That's your clutch gear. And from what I understand, one of these snap rings don't go in here. At least they'll tell you that in the instructions when you get the zippers thing ready. See right here? That's your trap door right here, right? That's your clutch gear. So when you get this, one of those snap rings don't go in there because this thing is so wide that the interference fit will just hold that clutch gear no problem right in there. That's the clutch gear right here. See it? Right here. See, this door is a heck of a lot thinner than this. This thing will rock back and forth in here a little bit under hard load. And then that clutch shell that sits on there with the magnets will hit the stator. And then go buy a charging system. Then you got to buy a new clutch shell because all the magnets will be like dust. And all that magnetic crap gets inside your transmission. You got to flush it a couple times. And you're changing all kinds of parts. Like I said, I had mine done in a machine shop with some special stuff. It actually been holding together a long time. I'm glad. But that's why I say, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to leave you with this final thought. I got so pissed off at working on, because I used to run it really, really hard. I got so pissed off at working on my old Sportster. This is back, it's in 89. I was working on it in 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. Basically those years mainly, right? And I said to myself, in the future, I'm never going to buy another Harley. I'll get a basket case. I'll go to S&S or maybe even RevTech. I'll get everything aftermarket. I'll get the complete bike that's screwed up, that's all there, everything's complete. I'll get a complete aftermarket engine and transmission, maybe a Baker transmission. Maybe I'll get the big one, but I'll lighten it up a lot because I like the lighter bikes. I know, like, back in the day, they used to take those shovel heads and they used to get them, like, down to the Sportster weight. I mean, talking Evo Sportster weight. The 4-speed Sportster is actually not bad because it is a little lighter than a freaking rubber mount Sportster that came out in 2004. All bikes got advantages and disadvantages. It's kind of like what you like, but you're better off just being a very stubborn individual and stick with your bike that you have that you like, because you can always modify it. I mean, if you want to make your Sportster into a garbage barge and make it into a touring bike, it'll work too. I'm personally trying to make my Sportster more and more, like I put the little windshield on it that very unobtrusive, makes it a lot easier, pleasurable to ride. It's still got a lot of wind, but takes a lot of it away. Doesn't make the Sportster look stupid with a big giant windshield on it. It's a small one. And you don't even notice it because it's clear. But I'm of the opinion that you want to just keep the bike and just keep modifying it, because that's what it's about. I mean, GQ dorks go out to dealers and buy stuff. And I tell you, one thing I was totally fuming at, and this is back in like 1991. This is even in Southern California, where the big bike culture was. And I was out in California before they even passed the helmet laws. This is when I was out there. You went to the southern, I forgot where it was, not in Oceanside, but around that area, North County, North San Diego County. And the dealership didn't even have essential parts for my bike for the rebuild for the machine shop. And I got it done by Mike Dreenan. I think they call him Panhead Mike. He had a real hopped up panhead. And he was in San Marcos, California. Regeneration Motors. No longer around, but he was really good. He did a bunch of stuff on my bike. And I was like the first Evo he built, because there was hardly any of them, there were new bikes, and basically none of them were trashed out except by me, because I'm like, the Tasmanian devil on that stupid thing, like a moron. But after I started paying out a lot of money, I slowed down, which is probably smart, I don't do that anymore. I'm 68, I'm still riding that stupid thing. and I'll be riding it when I'm 88, 98, 108, 128, whatever. And right now I'll be fixing to go to the gym. But I want to put this out because, again, take a screenshot of this, right? This is some good information. Oh, by the way, DirectCycleParts.com, I found they got the best prices on these Andrews gears. They got the best prices, by far. Yeah, if you look this up, let's see what this is. See? These guys right here, they got the best prices. So, I look at it like, do what you want to do, but I spent a lot of time on this, and I know it's confusing to a lot of people. I'm going to try to get... Now, I don't know what's going on with my channel with YouTube because, they might... I don't know, they're telling me I had a strike from... They had a video removed from like 11 years ago that had to do with healthy stuff and cancer. And then I had a video strike, so I'm just uploading now again some new stuff. I had a video strike for something to do with a cancer video from 11 years ago that's been fined for 11 years. And I'm like, what the hell? I don't know, maybe someday they're going to tell you, like, I can't put this information out because it's not electric cars. These are not eco-friendly. These are gas monsters and stuff. They make noise and they spew out pollution, and they'll probably tell you that's in the future. Right now we're still good. But if you come across this video, and I know it's lengthy, but I'm trying to give you like the whole spiel. You probably, you could take snapshots of things I've said and what I did here. You really only, to make it the wide ratio, you really only need to have these two parts. You don't need, like, if you're going to do this through Andrews, all Andrews, you're going to have to get the counter shaft too, right? And you can make a wider ratio, even one, but then you have to get the counter shaft, the Andrews counter shaft and stuff. You really only need these two parts. But basically, they've only been around for not that long, man. I mean, I think this might even be a 1-year part here. I'm not even sure. This is only like, let's see, 2 years basically, because it's late 84 to early 86. So, I mean, that's why Andrews don't make that stuff. You see? You know what I mean? I don't think they do. I didn't see it. But I was looking and looking and looking. So this is the best route that I found, and for me. I'm going to get all this stuff, though. And I'm going to get a piece at a time. Like that Johnny Cash song, I got it one piece at a time. It was, whatever, you made that car. It was a 69, 59, 39, whatever car, whatever, because he's working in a car factory, and it was all pieced together. I'm going to get all of these parts here and there. Probably the first one I'm going to get is his main shaft, because I know I need that. And then I'm going to get the trap door. And then the stuff after that, maybe I'll get these two first, because these are cheap. And then I'll get these two. Then I'll get the rest of the stuff here and there. And then I got other parts for it right now. I got a bunch of other parts. So when I take it apart, I'll probably do a video on it. Because there's a bunch of stuff I didn't go into about some of the better bearings you can put in like where the clutch release bearing is. You can put a tapered one instead of a roller bearing and stuff. And I'm going to put that. I got that already. Some other stuff like that. And, I was provided, YouTube's a safe haven. I mean, what am I going to do, man? God, I don't know what these guys are doing, man. I mean, I figure sometime in the future they're probably not going to like anything with gas powered. I mean, that's probably off in the future, but I never, when I put out those health videos 11 years ago, I never thought they'd be going against policy now, but, that's what happened, right? So, I figured this will probably be on the chopping block for policy too, because it's not electric, right? So while it's still up here, go take your snapshots. Maybe, what is this video? An hour? It's almost 55 minutes. I'm going to cut it right now. Take a snapshot of this, because this, I'm showing you the Harley part numbers here, right? All right, I'm telling you exactly what the difference is on, the teeth are. This is like. So an 89 Sportster is 18 teeth. That's actually late 86 to 1990 Sporty's 18 teeth. This is from late 86 to 89 is 26 teeth. You want to get the one with 27 counter shaft drive gear. That's giving you that wide ratio. The final drive is still the same. So you got, you know, a lower first gear, higher numerically with this setup. Just these two parts. Okay? And, but, you know, it's like, it's a heck of a lot of labor. Besides, it's not that much money. And it's just, you got to get some gaskets and stuff. And you could, you know, I have used, and I have it on there right now. I have not even used the primary gasket. I've used, I think I used, it's a particular type of RV, you know, gasket sealer, a really good, the better brand. I use that purely on it for the primary cover, and it works fine. Absolutely no leaks. So, I mean, you could save on a gasket that way, but, you know, you probably would want to change the shift shaft seal on a primary when you're doing this. Probably change the main shaft seal on the that goes in the case when you're pulling out the transmission and stuff. You know, some seal, so it'll be a little more than $115 in parts. Plus, you got to get the oil and stuff. You probably want to change the. Well, this is not even spelled right. You probably want to get, you know, a new clutch cable, right? Stuff like that. So it'll run you a little more than that, but you know, you probably do this for a couple $100. And now, even if you don't do this, I mean, this part, the zippers 4-speed, you could take. I should say this too. You could take. Let's get back to that picture of the clutch shell again. Let's see if we can find it. Well, I can't find it right now, but the clutch shell has a big bearing in it, and it has a big giant bearing in it, and that thing, man, probably this thing. You could press that big bearing out of the clutch shell and install a new one. They even have better ones that are a little bit stronger than the original one, and you know, even if you don't change out that Andrews part, by changing out that, see, this is the other bearing I was talking about. It's not the clutch shell bearing. This is the one for the clutch throb. I don't know if you would call it the throb bearing or release bearing. It's a ball bearing. You can put a tapered bearing in. It's even better. Yeah, this is the clutch shell right here. See this bearing right here? That one, number 19. You know, say you didn't change that Andrews part out. You know, if you took this all apart and you changed this bearing, that would take some of the play out of this thing, rocking back and forth right there. So, you know, that might, and you might even want to, you know, do what I did if you could find a machine shop that does that, or even change this entire part out while you're in here with the stainless steel one with the stainless steel backing, and you know, you'd be pretty good even without that trap door, because if you have the part with the clutch shell like this that has the stainless steel, the magnets are inside there with the stainless steel, that probably won't give you a problem unless you're like really drag racing like me, like a dumb moron. So, you know, I do like this bike, man. I'm very familiar with it. I mean, I seen it when I was at the machine shop almost every day when they're was being rebuilt. And I had the bike, I had the engine out of the frame a couple times. I had the transmission out a couple times out of the frame, and I did a lot of work on this bike. I'm pretty familiar with it. That's why I'm like, this is my bike. I'm sticking with it, man. And I hear people talk shit about Sportsters, but I don't know. I look at it like the Sportster's like, what do you like, a lean, thin woman, or you like a fat one? You know, I mean, that's why I look at it. You got Bertha, and you got Slim Jane, right? You know, whatever. So I take the slim one. Anyway, over now.